Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing The Gates of Fire by Steven Pressfield. I'll talk very briefly about the author, go into a spoiler-free overview of the book, talk about what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, who I'd recommend the book to, and finish off with what I'll be reading for next time. Steven Pressfield has had actually a really interesting career as a writer. He's been writing now for quite a while. He is probably still best known for writing the novel that became the movie, The Legend of Bagger Vance. He also wrote one of the writers of the movie Free Jack, which was a really strange science fiction movie in the early '90s. He also wrote about 20 years ago the book called The War of Art, which is kind of famous in writing circles as being kind of a book about the reason to make art. I haven't read any of his stuff. This is the first of his stuff that I've read. It was just interesting to see kind of the different pieces. This book is nothing like any of those books. It's a historical fiction novel based around the Battle of Thermopylae, which for those maybe not familiar was a battle between the Persian Empire and the Greek forces. If you've seen the movie 300, that's the battle that's depicted in that movie, and probably the popular depiction of that to modern audiences. They made a movie about the 300 in the 1960s as well. So it's a story that's been told frequently throughout kind of modern times. And Steven Pressfield, I think, wrote this in the mid-90s. And it is I thought a really interesting take on it. And it is about the the main character is a character named Xenos. And I will be mispronouncing a lot of the names here, so I do apologize. His character named Xenos, who is not a Spartan. He is someone who we learn early in the book. There's a framing device where we learn that he survives the Battle of 300 and is taken in by the Persian Empire. And one of the historians of the Persian Empire is taking his story down, and Xenos starts his story by explaining where he came from and how he came to be with the Spartan army. And we learn that he's not a Spartan himself. He is someone who lived in rural Greece. His village was attacked by other Grecians, and he left in order to survive, really. But he decides to join the Spartans and is not given full status in their society, and is something of the equivalent that I always think of as like a squire. So he's someone who trains with the soldiers and arms the soldiers, but he himself is not a full soldier. And that I thought was really interesting framework to give you a perspective of this world. As he's really our viewpoint character. He's apart from the army, but he's still a part of it in some ways. And so I thought that was a really interesting way to posit him as an outsider coming into this culture and kind of giving him an excuse to explain the different aspects of Spartan culture, which is a lot of what this book is about, is understanding who these people were, their kind of foibles, their society, what they believed in. And I thought that was really well done. And I thought that pushes the book forward. And I thought that gives you a dropping of details about the society that really, for me, the best part of historical fiction is where authors are able to really make you realize that these people were real human beings. And even though they had a different society than you, the one you may be living in, they have foibles like the rest of us, and they have desires, and they have problems, and they have competitions with people, and all of these things don't ever really change. It's really just kind of the details around the society, the different kinds of humor and ways that they kind of deal with their lives. And I thought Steven Pressfield, if there was one thing I would say that it does really, really well in this book, I think it's that. I think it gives you the sense of who these people are and how, their culture is different than yours, and it's structured differently, and people have different rights depending on who they are. And I thought all that was done really, really well. And I think he also makes the book, even though the book in the last, I'd say half of the book is really, really gory, there are definitely some funny parts of the book, and I think that gives it a levity in some places that you really do need. And then I think he does a good job of the battle scenes. I'd say the last roughly 40 to 50% of the book is really just the Battle of Thermopylae and really the battle scenes of what's happening to which characters and certain military movements and all that stuff. And I thought that was all handled really well. It's clear that he did a ton of research to write this book, and he kind of explained some of that in the acknowledgments. And I think that's done really well. I will say, if you're someone who does not like gore, the book doesn't really shy away from it, and it is a book about a large battle, and people are really torn up, as you would be given the situation that these individuals found themselves in. If there's some things I didn't like, they're pretty minor. I think that there's a part in the middle of the book where there's some plot contrivances with some of the secondary characters that felt really kind of whiplashy. He kind of brings them in, and it seems like on a dime he turns some things, and I think the foundation wasn't necessarily laid for the relationship that certain characters are supposed to have. But I thought that was relatively minor, and there's also, I think if you are someone who's reading this specifically to get to the battle, the first half of this book really is how this main character got to where he is, got to his station as far as being kind of a squire in this army. If you're not interested in that and just want to get to the battle, it is quite a while for you to get to the battle because you do get his full backstory. You get an understanding of who the major players in this, who the major kind of political and military leaders of this story are, of this world. And I think while most of those are paid off in the end, and I think that that's useful, if you're someone who just wants to get to the battle right away, then it is a slow burn to the battle. And you will have to learn some characters that you may not necessarily care about later in the book, but I think he uses that time efficiently and gives you dollops of this world and explains, the values that these people hold and why they're fighting. And there's quite a bit of the difference between, the Greek way of looking at the world and the Persian way, and, the why are we fighting. And there's a lot of speechifying in the book, too, when you get to the battles. And so, some of those things I did felt the book was a little stretched out overall, but it was about 440 pages in paperback, and it wasn't, I thought it was compelling enough to get you through. And I thought the parts of it that were interesting as far as the details of the world and the main character, I thought all did a really good job to push you through. And I thought the scenes of the battle, too, I thought were really, really well done, the action scenes. And I think overall I would really, really recommend it to someone who's a fan of historical fiction, as long as you're patient. And if you're reading it for the battle, like I said, it is going to be a while for you to get to the battle. When you do get to the battle, it's quite gory. And so if you can put those things aside, then you're going to enjoy it, because I think it's really well written from sentence to sentence. I think there's enough detail to give you a sense of what this culture is, and I think there's parts of it is very, very funny. So, Gates of Fire, Steven Pressfield. And until next time, I'll be reading The Aftermath, The Last Days of the Baby Boom in the Future of Power in America by Philip Bump. If you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will have my link below to my Twitter account. I don't read a ton of historical fiction for the channel, but if you do want to check out, I think Manhattan Beach may be the last historical fiction I read. I also read way back in the day Captain Corelli's Mandolin. So I'll leave a link to those videos as well if you are a fan of historical fiction and want to check any of that stuff out. Until next time, bye.